So Hitman has a new game mode. It puts the levels that are already in the game in a sort of roguelike structure, gives you random targets and random utility items and levels. And I think this game mode is so fitting for the series that it seems like the way it was meant to be played all along. You know, there's this weird thing that can happen with games where they sort of outplay themselves. Stealth games in particular can exhibit this phenomenon. You have all these options for when things go wrong and you get spotted or made, but getting compromised that way is a failure condition on its own, so most people would rather try again than salvage the run, right? I suppose this is a problem with any game that has a quote-unquote optimal way to play, whether that be an explicit or an implied objective, and whether we're talking about min-maxing towards one objective or picking the quote-unquote right one among a number of objectives. Then there's the issue of quote-unquote fun, as in, is the optimal path the most fun one as well, or does it require you to only pick boring but effective skills and whatnot? I think Hitman even played into that problem a little with the ready-made set-piece solutions to the main missions. The ones that play like a point-and-click adventure where you set up a surefire silent assassin kill. You know, those are quote-unquote fun the first time around, but after that they just dangle in your face as an easy out that makes the other solutions feel redundant. You know, shooting people is fun too, but if you were going for the highest score, you weren't ever going to do that, right? Now, the Freelancer mode alleviates much of that. So in Freelancer, you're invested in the campaign, so if things get nasty, you will have to salvage the mission. Otherwise, you may fail the entire campaign. If you get spotted, you might have to make some more corpses to survive the mission, or you might deliberately go loud just to get things done more quickly. Aside from that, there are bonus objectives that very often involve you compromising yourself, like killing guards, which is already a failure condition for a Silent Assassin rating, which is basically the highest score in the regular game modes. Silent Assassin exists in Freelancer too, but it's only available as a prestige objective, and not always. You can pick a prestige objective before every mission out of a random selection of 3. They pay more than regular bonus objectives, and they're mandatory in hardcore mode, which can be sort of irrelevant, or it can become quite a problem. You know, Hitman was one of those games where players would come to game the mechanics to such a degree that the fiction tended to fall by the wayside a bit. So you might stop thinking of the guards as virtual humans and more like pawns on the board, as it were. Stuff like that. That doesn't go away completely with the randomization, but it is mitigated somewhat by the fact that you can no longer go the same route, stay in this spot exactly this many seconds, knock this guy out and pull him exactly here, then this target will be at that exact location, and so on. So at the least, the gameplay gets more emergent again, and that's gold. That is until you've played Freelancer so much that you already know all the random targets that could possibly get picked from the NPCs in the level and the routes that the additional NPCs can patrol. But then you still have to work around the item randomization to an extent. You can only bring a lockpick or a keycard hacking thing if you have one on hand. And if you die, you lose the items that you brought to the mission. Now, I am aware that emergent gameplay isn't the be-all and end-all of game design. There are entire genres of games that are built on memorizing the sort of rhythm of a level and playing it through like a song, right? I am not sure, though, how well those two approaches mix in any given game, and how the audiences for each overlap. Anyway, about the fiction in Freelancer. So your handler tells you there are a number of criminal syndicates operating all over the place, and they employ people from all walks of life. That's the justification for having random civilians for targets. At the end of each campaign chapter, you have a mission where the target is one of a number of possible targets, and you have to find out which one it is by clues about their appearance and behavior, which are fairly goofy.
We also know that the target suffers from dehydration, and they see themselves as a foodie.
But there's only so much that the game world and the mechanics can give you for clues, right? Also, you have intel on the person's hair color, but not on their gender or ethnicity. I suppose that's because those are unmentionable qualities nowadays. Anyway, the fiction is daft, but that's in keeping with the story of the whole series, right? Hitman has great spy thriller kind of settings in like the criminal underworld and high society, but it always seems to crap the bed when it comes to the plot that ties it all together. In this Freelancer mode, though, their hands are tied a little, given that they need an excuse for any person on the map being a possible target. So, whatever. What else? You have this safe house as a hub level, which is basically a fancy loadout menu with the added bonus of extra gear you can find around the place, like poisonous mushrooms you can turn from emetic to lethal poison, but it's not much. What it also allows for is cosmetic customization, which you can unlock by leveling, and I'm not sure how I feel about cosmetic stuff in a transitional space in a single player game. I suppose this is something that appeals to some players more than others. I can definitely see the appeal of the safe house as a kind of hygge porn, though. It is like a dream house in a very idyllic, secluded location, so it does make one feel safe as well, I guess. Anyway, you know, it's a weird thing how games can have a life of their own, basically like an emergent meta, not like the meta that's basically min-maxing in competitive multiplayer games, but a design meta, right? Because modern games can be such complex constructs, and game development can be such a voyage into uncharted waters that you may never know how exactly your game will change during development, let alone how exactly it will turn out once it's finished. That is, if you're making something original, of course. So if you have a game with all sorts of systems that create emergent situations, there could be any number of meta rules and thus meta games that evolve out of the base game. And then designers can take up that meta and refine it into something more deliberate. So that's what I think happened here, that the game kind of found itself over all these iterations. And we've seen that happen before with things like PUBG, which was basically DayZ with an actual game built around it. And DayZ was a mod that used the basic mechanics present in Arma 2, right? So we went from simulating large-scale military engagements to open-world zombie survival. At that stage, people noticed the zombies were basically a distraction to the actual emergent gameplay, which was PvP, so someone came along and turned that into a quantifiable multiplayer experience, right? In the same vein, Fortnite became the biggest battle royale game for the younger demographic. It started as a base-building horde mode survival thing, then they flipped it into the hot new thing and struck gold, right? So that's a magical quality of video games, right? You can make a big, complex, fun structure, which may then turn out to become something different or something more than you thought you were building. It's like a flight of stairs in a park that turns out to be a great spot for skateboarding or something. Sometimes developers try to force that by making these open, adaptable games that are advertised as playgrounds for meta game creation, but those always just look like unfinished or non-games even to me. I don't know. Like, all those games that call for user-created content always seemed uninteresting to me. I know there are some that are very successful, like Mario Maker or whatever. I just think if you want a meta design to emerge, you'll have to make a big complex game first and then see how the mechanics play out in practice and see if you have something to build on, or if it's worth adding mod support so other people can do that. Or, you know, don't worry about that aspect at all until it's time. Ultimately, it's really only an avenue for big developers who are in a position to make big, complex games. So, whatever. Anyway, what was I talking about? Right, Hitman's Freelancer mode. Really good. A second wind for the Hitman series. Here's an ad for a game that I made. Slasher's Keep is a first-person roguelike with a focus on melee combat and loot. It has randomly generated dungeons with orcs, mole rats, and other monsters to fight, lots of loot to find, and a drag-and-drop weapon crafting system. I made it all by my lonesome, and it's available for PC on Steam.